Hello, it's Alabama Annie with part 24 of the Starlight Tavern, one of my books available on Kindle. We celebrated Lenny's birthday at the hotel. Most of our friends came for the party, including two of the Jackson children. Lenny had invited Willie and the youngest girl to come. They both went to school with us. Leonard gave his son a pair of binoculars as a present for his birthday, and I gave him a book about clouds and weather. He got a wristwatch from the Bells and a brush and comb set from Aunt Mary, and Willie gave him a pair of socks that his mother had knitted for him. Lenny liked all of the presents. He liked the book and everything else, but he particularly loved the binoculars. He wore them everywhere he could, every single day, to school and anywhere he went except to church. And that was only because Hattie wouldn't let him do that. On clear days, Lenny and I would go up behind the old hotel sometimes and lay on a rock and look down into the valley. That particular day, Lenny and I settled in on our favorite rock, and he put the binoculars to his eyes, and right off he spied something. He let me take a look through the lens after I begged and pleaded with him. There was a man dressed in strange clothing like Indians used to wear. I had seen pictures of them dressed that way, and there was a boy with him. The man was walking along the edge of an open field past the cemetery. We could see them clearly as they moved in and out of the trees. The man walked slowly as if he was looking for something, studying the ground, and he carried a bow in his hands. As Lenny watched, giving me a play-by-play, the man and the boy still stood and looked across the field, and then the man pulled an arrow from the quiver on his back. He notched the arrow in his bow, and he aimed. "He fired the arrow," Lenny cried as he passed the binoculars to me. Then the man ran across the field with the boy at his heels, and they bent over something. "Holy smokes," I cried. "He just killed a deer." We looked from the deer to the man and the boy as the man turned, raising his face and seeming to look right at me as if he knew I was watching. I recognized him. "It's Aldous Wells." "Let me see," Lenny cried, snatching back the binoculars. "It is Aldous," he said. "Why is he dressed like an Indian? I'd never seen him dressed that way before." "Oh, didn't you know?" Lenny said. "Aldous is a Cherokee." That next day, Aldous showed up at the tavern with a gift for us while I was doing the dishes from breakfast. It was a roast from the deer he and Willie had shot. I almost didn't recognize him when he stepped through the door bearing the gift, still wearing those buckskins. The quiver of arrows and bows still hung over his shoulder, and on his belt he carried a drawstring bag and a big knife. He handed the roast to Miss Hattie with a smile, turned to me and said, "I've been teaching Willie how to hunt so that now he can help feed that family of theirs." "And we killed a big buck yesterday," he said, smiling. "But you already knew that, didn't you, Maggie?" he asked, taking me off guard so that I almost dropped a coffee cup that I was rinsing. Hattie smiled and said that was a very good thing for him to do, and said that John was going up with his tractor to turn their garden the following week. "We cooked that backstrap last night at the Jacksons, and I thought Maggie needed to have some venison too," he told Miss Hattie. Then Lenny raced through the door. Aldous looked at the binoculars around his neck. He looked at Lenny. "How are those binoculars? I'll bet you can see really well with them," he said. As Lenny told him, we'd been watching them through the binoculars when he'd shot that buck. That next evening, I helped Hattie to prepare the roast for cooking. I brought in some onion and sweet potatoes from the garden and washed them in the sink. Then she showed me how to sear the roast in a skillet on the stove to seal in its juices and flavor. We salted and peppered it and rubbed it with a little bacon fat as well. We put the roast into a big Dutch oven with the potatoes and the onion and set it all to cooking. And we put a big pot of peas on to go with it. And when it was done, I thought it was very delicious, and I think I ate more than anyone, including Lenny, and Aldous seemed pleased that I'd liked it. That next Saturday, when we had finished our work, we decided we'd go over to the brow again and look down at the valley through the binoculars. And Lenny took along his book on trees as well as the book I had given him on weather and clouds. We wandered around for a while looking at trees, oak and poplar and maple and butternut, and then we settled in to look at the clouds for a while, and he told me he thought it was going to rain by nighttime. Then we laid down on our favorite rock, munching on apple slices and pickles and crackers we had brought along. We could see cattle in the fields and cars moving along the roads, and even see the old store at the abandoned mining town where the bootlegger lived, and Miss Clara's place where she raised her turkeys. We saw what happened to Willie Jackson that day, and it was a horrible thing that I will never forget. Willie was the oldest nephew of Effie Jackson and Buddy's oldest child. He sat behind me at school. Now, the Jacksons were half Cherokee and half African. Everyone knew that Effie's mother had been brought from West Africa by ship into the port of Mobile. She had been taken upriver into Montgomery and sold as a slave. But three of her children, one being Effie's mother, was sold again to a Cherokee chief who lived along the river. It was hard to believe that the Cherokee had ever held slaves, since they'd been slaves themselves at some point, along with many other tribes, but they did. The chief had 3 sons, and the youngest of them fell in love with Effie's mother, and they left the river for the mountain. Their only daughter then met and married the son of a trader, and they lived out their days in the cabin he had built for them. And after Jim himself was killed in Battelle, Effie had stayed on in their home for many, many years. She had lived alone until they had come from Oklahoma. Then, when Buddy brought his family from Oklahoma last year, Willie and his father had worked hard to make the old place a home for them all. Now, that Saturday, when we were lying on the rock in the sun looking down at the valley, it turns out Buddy had sent Willie down from the mountain into the valley to the old bootlegger at the store to buy him a quart of moonshine for Effie. Effie used the moonshine to make her medicines, tonics and such, which she infused with various medicinal plants which grew in abundance there on the mountain. Those tinctures would cure almost anything, and Buddy's wife was sickly after having yet another baby. Effie would mix elderberry and ratsbane with the shine to make a tonic for her that would strengthen her blood. At one time, her husband Jim had made the best moonshine on the mountain, and there had been no need to buy it anywhere. Jim had sold it to the miners in Battelle and to visitors and locals in Starlight, but he'd been killed down in the valley by the railroad tracks when those Haskins boys jumped him and stole his money long years before. And I thought it eerie that Willie would have met his demise there as well. With the binoculars, you could see the big field out to one side near the store where the bootlegger lived, near the railroad tracks. We watched the cows and a passing train, but then Lenny saw something. He saw Willie Jackson cross the railroad tracks, walking up to the back of the old store building from the mountain. Lenny saw Willie walk around the front of the building and go inside. "Willie's down there at the bootlegger's," Lenny exclaimed while we fought over the binoculars. I had grabbed them from him and was watching the store. I saw Willie come out the back door of the store in a few moments with a jug in his hand, and then I saw that old man come out too. I watched Willie wave to the man and go walking away again at a leisurely pace toward the field and the tracks, headed back home. I could see a train was coming. It was headed south, and then something else caught my eye. I saw a car come barreling out from the woods at the edge of the field. Let me see, Lenny said, snatching the binoculars back from me. He watched as the car slid to a halt at the store and two men got out. He gave me a play-by-play description. He could tell that something was wrong. He saw the old man come out of the store building and talk to the other two men. The old man pointed the way Willie had gone, and the men took off in the car across the field in that general direction. One of them had a rifle in his hands. They're going after Willie, Lenny cried. They have a gun. As he watched, they ran Willie down in the field with that car of theirs, and the driver got out, shoving him around like a rag doll, dragging him toward the railroad tracks and slinging the jug to one side. The old man's walking out toward them now, and he has a rope, Lenny cried. They're going to hang Willie, Lenny said, jumping to his feet. But just then the train passed and blocked our view entirely. Lenny turned to me. Run for help. We have to get my dad to come in a hurry. So we took off running across the field and through the woods as fast as we could to the hotel lawn, passing a crowd of people and some children as we headed to Lenny's house. We didn't bother knocking on the front door, but burst through into the office all out of breath as Leonard looked up from some paperwork at his desk. You have to go to the old store at Battelle, I cried. They're about to hang Willie Jackson.